Oh, cut it out. Do you know how many convictions we've got? Cut it out. You're in one lane. We have cleaned up this city. Yeah, historic, really? I'll tell you what's historic. What's historic is that I prosecute everything other than 10% of the cases, where the United States attorney before me didn't prosecute 67% of the cases. That's what's historic. I'm willing to take a not guilty. I'm willing to take a no true bill, because I'll take all the crimes and put them in. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the time we have.
Wow.
This is Jeanine Pirro being asked a completely normal question by a reporter about a judge quashing the Jerome Powell subpoena, and she completely loses her mind.
He has neutered the grand jury's ability to investigate crime. As a result, Jerome Powell today is now bathed in immunity, preventing my office from investigating the Federal Reserve. This is wrong, and it is without legal authority.
As a quick recap on what's going on, a judge looked at Jeanine Pirro's subpoena of Jerome Powell and said, no, you can't do that. That's not how this works. And her response was to go full persecution complex. The judge neutered her grand jury. Jerome Powell is bathed in immunity. The whole system is conspiring against her totally legitimate and not at all politically motivated investigation. And look, I mean, maybe she'd have more credibility here if she had literally any wins to point to. She just tried to send a former DOJ paralegal to prison for throwing a Subway sandwich at a federal agent. The grand jury wouldn't indict him with a felony. So then she downgraded him to a misdemeanor, and a jury acquitted him anyway. Then she tried to build a criminal case against Biden for using an auto pen. Her own prosecutors couldn't actually find a law that he had broken, so they just quietly shelved it. And now this. She's trying to say the judicial system is broken because it keeps telling her no, but that's not quite how it works. This is just called losing in court, which she has now become very familiar with.
In a blistering ruling, Judge James Boasberg wrote, quote, "There is abundant evidence that the subpoena's dominant, if not sole purpose, is to harass and pressure Powell, either to yield to the president or to resign, and make way for a Fed chair who will."
I'm just going to repeat the judge's ruling because it is so key here. The subpoena's dominant, if not sole purpose, was to harass and pressure Jerome Powell, either to yield to the president or to resign. So in black and white, we're hearing what we all already know. This investigation was never about law enforcement. It was about Trump not getting what he wants and then unleashing whatever attack dogs he has on the guy who dared to cross him. The investigation was supposedly about Powell misspending renovation funds, but there was no credible evidence, and the case was thrown out. But if Pirro is suddenly so concerned about officials misusing government funds and lying to Congress, I have a whole list for her to look into. Let's start with Pete Hegseth, her colleague who oversaw a $93 billion Pentagon spending spree in a single month. A single month. I don't even know how I could spend that much money in 1 year, let alone a single month. And that included nearly $7 million, $7 million, on lobster tails, $2 million on king crab, $15 million on ribeye steak, and then my personal favorite, $124,000 on ice cream machines. Or let's talk about Kristi Noem, who lied to Congress under oath about a $220 million no-bid contract that was funneled to companies with direct ties to her inner circle. Or let's talk about Kash Patel, the FBI director who has been jet-setting around on government aircraft to golf in Scotland, to watch wrestling at Penn State, to visit his girlfriend in Tennessee, to party in the hockey locker room at the Milan Olympics. And one of these escapades, by the way, caused the FBI plane he was using to sit in Florida during a mass shooting at Brown University, which meant the evidence response team had to drive through a snowstorm to get there. And let's not forget, this is the same administration who says they don't have money to fund your Medicaid or your healthcare or your SNAP benefits, but they do have money for $7 million lobster tails.
Ordinarily, whenever you see a U.S. attorney call a press conference and address the cameras, it's because there's been an indictment or a conviction or a sentence. I don't think I've ever seen a U.S. attorney or an attorney general call a press conference to complain about a ruling that he or she did not like. That was essentially a public temper tantrum. I want to start with that. Second of all, you heard Jeanine Pirro say that this judge, Judge Boasberg, is a, quote, activist judge. Now, as Paula said, this judge was elevated to the district court by Barack Obama. But before that, he was put on the local D.C. Superior Court by George W. Bush. And in this judge's past, he has actually denied a motion years ago to try to get Donald Trump's tax returns. He ruled in favor of Donald Trump.
She said specifically, this is the first time ever a judge has done this. Is that true?
I'm not exactly sure what she's talking about. Judges have not uncommonly quashed subpoenas, essentially blocked subpoenas. I mean, that is uncommon, but it absolutely has happened many, many times over.
Pirro kept saying that Jerome Powell is bathed in immunity, where it was her phrasing. It would appear to me in reading, a cursory reading of this, that the judge's problem is there's no evidence. That this judge does not think there's enough evidence. And if there was proper evidence that this could move forward, doesn't seem like it's being bathed in immunity.
So that was the next item on my fact check list. I'm glad you brought it up, Jessica. Perfect. So yes, this is not technically immunity for Jerome Powell. Immunity suggests that he cannot possibly be further investigated or prosecuted. In fact, what this ruling does is basically just block these specific subpoenas which were sent over to the Federal Reserve.
I want to start with the absolute absurdity of this press conference. Jeanine Pirro called a press conference to complain about a judge. I don't think any of us are surprised about how dumb and just useless this administration continues to be, but still, had to say it. So you heard from those CNN clips that Pirro's press conference was filled, bathed even, in lies and misinformation. Literally none of what she said is true. Which brings us to a much larger pattern here, which is that this is the Trump Playbook. Chapter 1, constant misinformation. If a court rules against you, the judge is an activist. If a jury won't convict, they're politically biased. If the case falls apart, someone is bathed in immunity. Nothing is ever the result of not having actual evidence. It's always some sort of conspiracy. And Pirro loves to talk about how hard she's working. She prosecutes more cases than her predecessor. She's doing what people are afraid to do. She's taking on the big fights. Sure, she's prosecuting lots of cases, but she's not actually winning any. They're not going anywhere. Because that's what happens when you only take on politically motivated cases instead of cases with actual, real, hard evidence. And I just want to touch on her accusation about the judge being a political activist. I'm sorry, what was Jeanine doing before she became U.S. attorney? She was a Fox News host with a show. She campaigned loudly and publicly for Donald Trump for years, and that's why she has the job she has now, because of that loyalty. Trump doesn't put people in these positions because they're the most qualified. We already know that. He puts them there because they will go after the people he wants gone and protect the people he wants protected. And then when the actual judiciary, the people who got their jobs through a real process that didn't involve appearing on Fox News and praising Trump, when they push back, they're activists. Okay.
It's not a list, but I think there'll be others. I mean, they're corrupt. These were corrupt, radical left Democrats, because Comey essentially he was worse than a Democrat. It began before I got to office. You know that. Wait a minute. Before I came to office, I started hearing rumors about Russia. I said, what the hell do I have to do with Russia? Nothing. And then it got worse and worse.
Is this more about justice or is it about revenge?
It's about justice, really. It's not revenge.
So who are these others, and how do you interpret his claim that this is not revenge?
Well, it's hard to refute that it's not revenge, because he said it. It's his own words.
Trump says, I don't have a list. Let's not forget Trump has publicly and repeatedly called for investigations into James Comey, Joe Biden, Jerome Powell, 6 members of Congress, the New York Attorney General, the governor of Minnesota, and his own former vice president, and I don't even know how many more. He probably doesn't have a list because it's too many people to write down and keep track of, especially for someone with dementia. And then he says he's doing this for justice, not revenge. I mean, that's not what his campaign clips say. He spent his entire 2024 campaign promising retribution. He used that exact word. Retribution was the word he chose to describe his second term to his own supporters. And let's not forget what else he campaigned on. He also campaigned on lowering your grocery bill and your rent and your gas prices, but instead, he's spending his time investigating the chair of the Federal Reserve because he didn't bow down to him. He's implementing tariffs on every country that pissed him off, raising your grocery prices. He went to war with Iran, which is causing gas prices to skyrocket. He is letting his Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, spend $93 billion in a single month, $7 million of which was on lobster tails, and $15 million of which was on king crab, all while he then goes to Congress and says, we don't have any money, we need to cut Medicaid and healthcare and food assistance. Every single day, Donald Trump wakes up and asks himself one question: what can I do for myself? Not for you, or for your family, or for your rent, or groceries, or gas, for him. And you are the one paying for it.